Tsama lecha now wafshir. For those who don't know, this is the first Niggun the Rebbe ever taught. And he taught it the Shabbos after Pesach, Shabbos Kedoshim, Tov Shin Yudal, 1954, after the third or fourth year of the Nesias, however you want to count it. And when the Rebbe taught the Niggun, he said that it's a Niggun from the Alter Rebbe. Now Chassidim knew the Alter Rebbe's Niggunim, and there's no such Niggun. No one ever heard of Tzama. Where did it come from? The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, taught the Niggunim of the Alter Rebbe to his Chassid. His name was Rebbe Elchanan Doi Marazov, Chanya Marazov. Rabbi Marazov's children lived here in New York and in Montreal. They heard all the Niggunim from their father. Tzama's not in the list. So where did Tzama come from? Where did Tzama come from? The Rebbe said it's Niggun from the Alter Rebbe. So either he heard it from his father, but it's hard to imagine that he would have heard it from his father and they didn't know it in Lubavitch, because his father was the grandson of Tzemach Tzedek. Now I don't know this for a fact, but if I was a gambling man, and I'm not, I would bet that this Niggun came from Gan Eden. There's two Niggun that the Rebbe taught that he took from the under Rebbe, Tzama Lecha Nafshi and Shamil. There's no way Shamil composed Shamil. Impossible. A Chechen terrorist did not compose Shamil, but the Shamil's Niggun. Tzama, the Rebbe taught Tzama right in 1954. Now we'll talk a little bit later about Tzama, but I want to say, I think it's appropriate that we should try to sing as many of the Niggunim of the Rebbe. The next Niggun the Rebbe taught was Pesach of 1955. It's the Niggun V'hisha Amda, which is a good Niggun to sing always, especially now. V'hisha Amda Oila V'yiseinu V'lonu V'hakadosh Baruch Hu U'matzileinu Miyad. The Rebbe taught Niggunim that are very popular. Like how many Niggunim are there? V'hisha Amda. Must be 100. How many Daikachal Kenus are there? How many Rachamon Da'oneh? How many Atavachartonus? The Rebbe taught songs that there's a lot of other songs on the same words, but somehow the Rebbe's got the best ones. the tune that the Rebbe put to these words, wherever it comes from, they're just good choices. You know, if you want to sing Dal Kachal Lekeno, you're going to sing Ar Dal Kachal. Why? Because the tune says what the words are saying exactly. You know, Tzama Lecha Nafshi. I mean, the tune, you couldn't have a better tune for those words. But all the Niggunim of the Rebbe, Atavachartonu, Anim Zmires, the tune and the words, it's a very, very good shidduch. Most of the Niggunim that Rebbe taught, he didn't create. He learned them in Europe. He chose very, very good ones to teach us. Every one is special. But Tzama Lecha Nafshi is certainly in a class by itself. Tzama Lecha Nafshi is the Rebbe's song. When the Rebbe wanted to say something in a melody, he would sing Tzama Lecha Nafshi. When I was a kid growing up, at least once a year, possibly more, in the middle of a Farbrengen, all of a sudden, Tzama! No warning. No, everybody get ready. Just boom, the Tzama started. And when the Rebbe said, Tzama! The room shook. Tzama Lecha! The Rebbe said, Tzama! You could hear so much Tzama in the Rebbe's, there's videos of the Rebbe singing Tzama. You have to understand, there's no warning. It wasn't like the kids had ready to get had time to prepare themselves. The Tzama, the thirst. And it's a fascinating thing, you know, if we would be people who are, there's two kinds of people, as I'm sure you know. There's people who live life and people who study other people's lives. You understand? Now, the people who study other people's lives, they think they're very, very important. So they sagen, sie sind nicht stark. Aber the meistens aber is Rachmanis. You're supposed to live, not study other people's lives. So if we would study the Rebbe, and of course we're smart enough not to, the Rebbe is Tzama Lecha Nafshi. You're talking about a man, a Rebbe, who every breath of his was simcha. Every breath. The Rebbe is full of joy, and he expects every chassid, he wants every chassid to be in the Ma'amad of Simcha. But when the Rebbe wanted to speak in a melody, the melody that he spoke is very, very far from joyous. It's almost a bitter Niggun, some of the Chanash. I saw once in the Rishime. So who won? Farbrengen, so halb noch 10. Who won? You know already who won? We'll know soon. We'll know soon. We'll listen. We'll find out when the room fills up at the vis. Wait. They didn't post it on COL yet. Okay, noch a paar minutes. A minute. The Rebbe wanted every chassid to be besimcha. The Rebbe himself is a yid who was always besimcha. I know for a fact a yidl, Nishka Lubavitcher, who knew the Rebbe. He once walked into the Rebbe's room in the 1970s. He said to the Rebbe, "Was macht der Lubavitcher Rebbe?" Which is basically, "How you doing, Rebbe?" Which is not exactly respectful, but he had that relationship with the Rebbe. And without hesitating, the Rebbe answers him, "Ich bin tamid besimcha." I'm always joyous. I saw the Shima. I have someplace in my house, all kinds of papers that I collected, and I can't find it. I've looked for it many times. I can't find it, but I didn't make it up. I'm just not smart enough to invent this. That a Yid walked into the Rebbe in the early 70s. It's more than 50 years ago. This Jew was a survivor, had come from the old country, and the old country was not a little different than America. It was a whole different wavelength. The Yerushalayim, the Chassidus, the Torah, everything was, by American standards, it was pushed holy. Rabbi Yossi once said, Rosh Hashiva, said once in a speech, he said that Rosh Hashivas in America, in Poland, they would have been launderers. They would have taken care of the mikveh, the level of learning. Yeah. So he came into the Rebbe. He was a Fataytish Yid. He was a European Jew, and he says to the Rebbe that he can't find a place over in America. It's 25 years, 27 years after the war. It's 1972, 73. He says to the Rebbe, "Ich komm nicht durch. I can't deal with this. It's a whole new religion, a neue Yiddishkeit." And he doesn't find a place for himself. He's not happy. He has no camaraderie. Doesn't have anybody to talk to. It's a whole new world. And the Rebbe says to him in Yiddish, and I have to say the Yiddish because I think it's so precious. Was trachst du? Ich wollt nicht gewollt sein in Deire shel Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai. Wenn Teire sich gewalget in der Gassen, aber der Rebbe hat mir gelegt in dem Dor, weil ich tan da avoide von dem Dor, und ich es tan besimcha. The Rebbe says, you don't think I would prefer to be born in the generation of Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai. Now you have to understand, there's a precise choice here. Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai went through the Holocaust. Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai is on that list of Gedolei Yisrael that says, like it says in Eicha, it says in Lamentation, it says in Eicha, Ani ha-gevero oni b'shever bas ami. I am the gever. The word gever is used in Chassidus for a Baal Tshuva, someone who heals. Ani ha-gevero oni. I am the gever who saw the impoverishment b'shever bas ami, when my nation was broken. Yirmiyah Novi wrote those words about himself. Yirmiyah Jeremiah wrote Lamentations. He wrote, Ani ha-gever, I am the person who witnessed the destruction of the Jewish people. The Navi says, Hashem said to Yirmiyah, you're going to see hell. I'm giving you one reprieve. They're not going to kill you. Thank you very much. This was the only thing. David told me, you're going to survive it all. You're going to be able to say witness. Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai was the same thing. He witnessed Churban Bayis Sheni. And the Rebbe witnessed the Churban that is in recent times. So his choice of comparisons is precise. He didn't say, I would like to be in time of Hillel. He said, Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai. Because there's a lot of comparison between himself and Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai. But when Rabbi Yechonah ben Zakkai was presiding over the Sanhedrin, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, but the yeshiva, Yavne, was intact. So the Rebbe says to him, you don't think I would prefer to be in the times of Yechonah ben Zakkai when Torah was rolling in the streets? But God Almighty, it's this translation in English. You don't think I wouldn't prefer to be in the generation of Yechem Azaka when Teda was rolling in the streets. But God Almighty put me in this time. I'm going to do the work that I need to do here, and I'm going to do it with joy. Because the way the Eibishter operates is he doesn't exactly ask us what we want. He puts us in a situation, and we can either adapt to the situation or spend our lives being victims, complaining. And the Rebbe says, I'm not going to be a victim. I mean, I like it, but this is what I got to do, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you Lashon Hara. I think I said it last time I was here, so forgive me for repeating myself. But I'm not going to say any names. There was a boy who looked in 770. This goes back my father's generation. He went through the Holocaust as a child. He didn't have a father. He was a child of the Holocaust. I don't know if he's in Russia. He wasn't in Poland. He wasn't necessarily in the camps, but he lost his father. And he came to America. He was incredibly diligent. He was a moidendik masmid. And he became mamish agon. He's a genius, like he's a scholar of Torah for real, not in the American version. He's truly a god. And the Rebbe held him like a son. The Rebbe loved him like a son, mamish. When he published his first volume of Chodesh Torah, the Rebbe paid for it. The Rebbe paid for it. He had no money. He was a bacher. And the Rebbe wrote him a long letter, which is published in the beginning of his book, which begins with the words that the Rabbeim of Chabad would not write haskamas, they would not write approbations on Sfarim. But then the Rebbe continues and says, but I'm a witness that you sat and learned Torah day and night. He would sit in 7, he wouldn't go home till the Rebbe went home. So if the Rebbe sat in 7 till 6 in the morning, he would sit and learn. They would walk out of his room, and he was sitting directly opposite the Rebbe in the Zal. The Rebbe would see him, and the Rebbe would leave, and then he'd go home to sleep. If he had to come back and learn, he was a moidendik masmid. And the Rebbe wrote such a beautiful letter when he published his first sefer. There was a family of a Tomim from Lubavitch who had passed away years earlier. This man was a Gaon, a great scholar. And in Mistame, he was a bigger Talmud Chacham than this Bacharul in 770 that the Rebbe wrote the Haskama for. And they published their father's Chodesh Torah. And they asked the Rebbe to write a Haskama, an approbation. And the Rebbe said that it's not the midig of the Rabbeim to write Haskamas. So they said to him, what about him? What about him? This 21-year-old Bacharul, his book you're approving, and the book of one of the great sages of Taim Chatmimim you can't approve. I don't know exactly what the wording was, but basically the Rebbe said, this is none of your business. These are my guys. Your father was, this is meine Kinderlach. And if you're misbeinen in it, if you think about it, I'm a little young to remember this, but I do remember the tail end of it. You must understand, the Hasidim who came from Russia, the old-timers, the generation who learned in Lubavitch, had no use for us. American Lubavitch Hasidim, we were hyper, we were emotional, we were dumb. Everything we did was so impulsive. They couldn't value us. American Chassidim, the Rebbe's Chassidim, who went on, they could not value us. Because they were raised in a different generation. Lubavitch really was a special place. I mean the city of Lubavitch, the yeshiva, the level of learning, the level of fear of God, and the level of depth and integrity and modesty, quiescence. And here we were, American boys and girls, who were so American, empty and showy, or showy and empty, whatever order you want to say it. They had no use for us. And they couldn't value us. But the Rebbe didn't have a problem. Now I would imagine that if the Lubavitcher Bochanim from Taim Chatmimim were, so to speak, head and shoulders above us, Mistama the Rebbe was also head and shoulders above us, huh? You think? The Rebbe himself, was war a kesher amir gehat mit the Rebbe, we had nothing in common with the Rebbe. But we are the Rebbe's children. And the Rebbe's philosophy was, what God gave me is what I have, and these are my people. End of story. You know, Rabbi Hurston just passed. Rabbi Moshe Hurston passed away a few weeks ago. And the real truth of the matter is that these are people that are irreplaceable. The Rebbe's first shluchim, there are generals. They really are generals. They were chassidim. I mean, compared to us, they were really great chassidim who made great sacrifices. You know, guys go on shlichus today, and in 3 years they build a building. When those guys went on shlichus, they waited 30 years to build a building. Everything was so much more difficult, and they worked for the Rebbe. The Rebbe was holding them by the hand and developing the work as the Rebbe wished it to be. But it was very, very hard for them, and they were very dedicated. The Rebbe once told Rabbi Herson, I'm not the Maharal Miprag. I can't create people. I work with what I got. Finished. If the Eibishter wanted, he could have given me chassidim with great minds and great hearts, who are very mature, who have no paranoia, who are not jealous, who are self-assured, so they're not afraid someone's going to steal their territory. What did the Rebbe give? Eibishter give him? Whatever he decided. And the Rebbe said, this is what I got, and this is what I'm going to work with, and these are meine Kinderlach. And this story, where the Rebbe writes Haskama for a boy who was in Rebbe's Talmud, and he wouldn't write Haskama for a man who lived in Lubavitch. Why? I'm sure that person's book was more precise in Lomdis. But this is the Rebbe's. This is the Rebbe. We are the Rebbe's children. And the next generation is even more so. And the next generation, our children that are now growing up, the Rebbe's connection to us isn't based on our worthiness. It's based on the fact that we are the Rebbe's. It's what God gave him. The Eibishter gave the Rebbe us. You know, it actually says in the Sichos, I used to always deny it, but then I saw it with my own eyes. It says in the Sichos that the Rebbe Rashab handpicked who would learn in Teim Chetmimim. And by extension, you have to say the Rebbe handpicked who's going to be a Lubavitcher. I have 3 brothers, they're all shluchim. And one of my brothers tells me, you know, you go to a community and you're a makar of people, and a certain percentage become frum. And then they leave, and then they become Esha Torah. It's good, they invite you to the wedding, give you a bracha under the chuppah, and it hurts. It hurts. You put so much into a person, and then they don't like you. You're not religious enough for them, you're not learned enough, whatever the shaykh says. And he said to me, the first time it happened, it was terrible. He said, I woke up one day and I decided, not everybody merits to be a chassid of the Rebbe. Finished. He's not better than me. He doesn't have this chus. He doesn't have this chus. We are connected to the Rebbe, and it's a great chus. It really is. We're not here because we're worthy. We're not here because we're so smart. It just worked out. The Eibishter geholfen, God Almighty arranged. As the Lois come, and it should work out that we should be in these Dalar Ames. Baruch Hashem, Gleib Hashem is Baruch. And the Rebbe loves every Jew. I mean, there's no doubt. Everybody knows the Rebbe's Avas Yisrael it borders on the obscene, you know. Rebbe's Avas Yisrael. I heard from non-Chabad people who talk about how much the Rebbe couldn't see a bad Jew. Bechbal didn't exist. Always had a positive spin. Always had a way of seeing a Yid in a positive light. And some people say that Rebbe's love for Jews was so extreme that you could ask questions whether it's halachically allowed. You know, the Rebbe, you know the story, yeah? Someone once came to the previous Rebbe and said to him, you know, there's a section in Shulchan Aruch, there's actually a section in Shulchan Aruch about Jews that you're supposed to hate. So some people have very long lists of those kinds of Jews, you know what I'm saying? They're very frum. The Rebbe, if Rebbe's list is blank, there's not one Jew on the list. Excuse me, sir, there are a lot of qualified candidates, especially 80 years ago, there were more candidates then than now. So the previous Rebbe said the Shulchan Aruch is very big. It's 4 sections. The laws of Sinas Yisrael are the last simanim in the last of the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm working my way through the Shulchan. I haven't gotten yet to the idea of mitzvah l'sna'is. If you learn Tanya chapter 32, the Alter Rebbe addresses it from a point of view of halacha. He said, listen, the Jew you're supposed to hate, you're also supposed to love. And the Jew you're supposed to hate and love, you're supposed to feel bad for him. So it becomes, like it says in Tanya, L'Yaakov asher podes Avram. You have Yaakov, which is Rachamim, compassion, and Avram, which is Ahava. So they're on one side, and the opposite is Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Gevura. Gevura, when it becomes negative, is the opposite of love. So the Alter Rebbe says you're supposed to love the guy, you're supposed to hate the guy, you're supposed to feel bad for the guy, so it becomes 2 against 1. So in your heart, the love and the compassion overrules the hate, even those Yidden that you're supposed to hate. And the Rebbe couldn't find the Jew worth hating. Every Jew was worthy of love. Every Yid was worth Ava. I told the story Shabbos. I'm going to say it with the name. It's my aunt. She's lifting Gan Eden. You know her if you've read her books as Miriam Neville. She's my father's sister. Miriam Neville is Miriam Paltiel. She didn't have an easy life. She went through Alamedur Gehenim. She was in Moscow when the Germans attacked Moscow. My father says he remembers rockets hitting the building he lived in. You know, ordnances hitting the building. Then they escaped to Siberia, where they, Baruch Hashem, had starvation for 3 years. My grandfather chose Siberia over Asia. He figures you can starve here, but in Siberia there's no bugs. There's no bacteria, it's too cold. So the people didn't die from disease, and it was true. Then he came back to Moscow. Her mother died when she was a 6-year-old. I mean, there's not a tzaddik she didn't experience. Anyway, she raised a beautiful family. Amazing. Amazing how these people had such brachas. And the Rebbe held them by the hand. Without the Rebbe, these people would have been nothing. The Rebbe held my father, my aunt, my uncle, their whole generation. More than a father. My aunt once told me she was a 60-year-old. And the Rebbe saw her on the street and walked up to her and started asking her about how the high school is doing. 10 minutes about what's going on in her life. That kind of concern for the individual, it was so, they felt how much the Rebbe created that generation. Wounded people. Anyway, her life wasn't easy. When things would get really unbearable, she lived in Worcester. She'd get on a bus by herself. She'd go Greyhound, she'd come to 770. She'd go into the Rebbe that night. In those years you could do it. She'd unload and she'd go home. She'd take a vistach, clean out the system, and then she get room for more garbage. Like you have a garbage bag, you gotta empty the bag, you put more in. So she came once to the Rebbe, and she said whatever she had to say, and the Rebbe listened to her. And when she finished, the Rebbe said to her, Kol Ma'ad, I heard it from her personally, Kol Ma'ad Ovid Rachmana L'Tav Ovid, which means in English, everything Hashem does turns out for the best. It doesn't mean it is the best. That's Gamzu L'Toiv. Gamzu means it's good now. L'Tav Ovid means it's going to be good later. The Rebbe has Sichas and Rabbi Kiva and Nachamish Gamzu. It's 2 different levels. And her children told me, she didn't tell this to me, that the Rebbe translated it for her in Yiddish. Everything, alles was der Rebbe tut, los sich heraus zu Gutens. Whatever Hashem does will turn out in the end. That's how she translated it for good. So she tells me, without any ability to control her lips, she heard herself say, Wer sagt? Who says? It was so disrespectful. It was mamish. It was completely impulsive. It was a knee-jerk reaction. There was no awareness. The word just plopped out of her mouth. Who says? Wer sagt? And the Rebbe gave her one of those smiles that we've seen 100 times, and said, Ich sag. I say. I reassure you, I say. So I told the story. I've been talking all weekend. I told it Shabbos. So it was not a religious crowd. It was from crowd. It was a Beis Chabad. So the people said to me, he wasn't insulted. What a chutzpah. A young girl tells the Rebbe, who says? Maybe it's rotten. Who says? And he said to her, So I tried to explain to the people. It was kind of hard, for the Rebbe to take us personally. Because he was, he knew exactly. The Rebbe understands the nisyonos that we have. The real and the imaginary. The worst tests that we have are imaginary. Because he can't fix an imaginary problem. It isn't there. A real problem you can solve. But a problem that's in your head, that you concocted, that you developed, that you brewed, it's very difficult to deal with the stuff that's often imagined. She didn't hurt his feelings, you understand? She didn't upset him. And the Rebbe has this relationship with us. And the Rebbe has a lot of patience, but he also has no patience at all. And the whole philosophy of the Rebbe, the whole way of thinking of the Rebbe is, and everybody knows this, do me a favor. Get out of your head and just do something. You can't get out of your head and fix your head. That's very difficult to do. But if you get out of your head and you do something, you're not saying to your head, okay, I'm fixing it. You're saying to your head, leave my head alone. My head's the problem, but I can do good. And the more we do, the more the head heals. The mishagasen, especially the imagined ones, there are real ones. The imagined ones heal themselves or get busy with good. Which of course explains why there was never a Rebbe who made a greater priority out of Lai HaMedrash Ikir El HaMaisa, or as the Rebbe would misquote the Mishnah 1,000 times. HaMaisa Hu Ikir, there's no such expression. HaMaisa Hu Ikir is the Rebbe's expression. The Mishnah says, Lai HaMedrash Ikir El HaMaisa. The Medrash, which means the study and the interpretation. The word Medrash actually means interpretation. Lai HaMedrash Ikir, the study and the interpretation is not what's important. El HaMaisa, the most important thing is what we do with it. So the Rebbe created this phrase, HaMaisa Hu Ha'ikir. The action is the main thing. And the action heals. The action heals. It gets us past the shtussim, gets past the nonsense. It gets us past ourselves. Anyway, but I want to make my point. But when the Rebbe wanted to say something that truly spoke what was in his heart, he said, Tzameh lecha nafshi. In other words, it's nit azeh geschmack. You know, here's this Rebbe who preaches positivity and simcha, and he doesn't only preach it, he practices it. The Rebbe, I mean, people say that the Rebbe used to say, I never heard it from the Rebbe, but my teachers told me that the Rebbe said, by nature, I'm an introvert. By nature, I'm a book person. I'm melancholy. I'm not effervescent. The Rebbe by nature is an introvert. And introverts and academics tend to be a little bit more heavy. That's the Rebbe's nature. And the Rebbe said, I completely reconfigured myself. I recreated myself to be besimcha all the time, to be joyous all the time, because this is what's needed now. And when you got to do what you got to do, whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, whether it's natural or not, the Rebbe is the epitome of simcha. But when he wanted to say what he was thinking, he said, Tzameh lecha nafshi. And if you want to interpret it on a personal level, it's not so geshbak. It's not easy. It's not easy being where the Rebbe is. You know the stories. Before the previous Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe got together a bunch of Chassidim. And he told the Chassidim that Lubavitch is suffering from a lack of resources, financial resources. And the problem is that we're dependent on outsiders, on Spalitzaka, philanthropists who are not Lubavitchers, they're not frum. So it gets very sticky. Let's organize a group of 10 men, the Rebbe said. We'll go into the previous Rebbe and we'll ask the previous Rebbe that for the sake of the previous Rebbe, Lubavitch should have its own gvirim. Lubavitch should become financially independent. There should be sufficient resources in Chabad itself with the Rebbe not to have some guy and give him a plaque and give him covet and he doing you a whole favor. The Rebbe should have the money he needs for the work he needs to do. The Rebbe organized it. But before they could go into the previous Rebbe, he passed. So the Chevra decided, it was the Rebbe's idea, right? So they went into the Rebbe. And they said, we have this idea. We heard this from a guy named Ramash, that means you yesterday, that Lubavitch needs its own gvirim. So we came to request that the Rebbe should give a bracha, that Lubavitch should be financially independent, that in Anash, amongst Lubavitch Chassidim, there should be the kind of resources, financial resources, that the Rebbe is not going to be dependent on outsiders. So they told the Rebbe's own words back to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, It's tezech mit andere spakulen. Now I'm wearing different spectacles. I see things differently, and it ain't that simple. It's not so simple. Another story in the same vein. The Rebbe visited France in 1947 to get his mother. He spent 3 months there. And by that point, Lubavitch Chassidim were trickling into Paris. Remember, after the war, they had to escape Russia, 46. And they ended up at the DP camps in Germany and in Austria. And slowly but surely, they were liquidating these camps. They came to Paris, and they waited for countries to allow them to emigrate to America, Canada, Australia, of course, Israel, and so on. So the Rebbe comes to Paris, And there were enough Lubavitcher Chassidim. They weren't all there by any means. My father was not there. But there were enough Lubavitcher Chassidim and parents at the time. And the Rebbe says to a number of Lubavitcher Chassidim, why don't you travel to New York? Why don't you come to the Rebbe? So they say to our Rebbe, we asked the previous Rebbe and he's not letting us come. We asked the previous Rebbe about coming to New York and he's not letting us come. So the Rebbe said, you got it all wrong. Don't ask. Tell him you're coming and ask for a brach. The Rebbe hates it. Chassidim, instead of asking the Frierdiker Rebbe what to do, they should let him know they're coming and ask for a brach. So a bunch of Chavre did it. And they died brachas, they came to York, B'chol Tainabam, a few others. Then the Rebbe passes away. Our Rebbe becomes Rebbe. So a bunch of people sent into the Rebbe notices, we're coming to New York, we're asking for a brach, and they get back an answer, excuse me sir, you have to ask. So he told the Rebbe, it was your idea. It was your idea. He said, yeah, it was my idea then. It's not my idea now. It's a whole other situation. It's an Geschmack. You know, it's very good when somebody else. The Rebbe Rashab was a little boy. He was so young, he couldn't even speak. And they used to say, I don't want to be a Yebbe when I grow up. Let somebody else be the Yebbe. Chassidim zayin nasacha, Yebbe zayin. There's many Chassidim only want. Yebbes are lonely. But that's how it is. The ones who don't want the job end up with it. That's how it works. But the Rebbe would sing Tzama. The Rebbe would say Tzama l'chanafshi, meaning, as much as the Rebbe was the Rebbe of our generation, and the Rebbe of our generation means everything had to be done b'simcha. The Rebbe said, when you live in America, you have to be American. You have to make demonstrations, you have to make parades, you have to be positive. I mean, all American sales techniques the Rebbe used. Why? He's quoted the Chazal, Azles, Bakarte, Halach Benimusi. You come to a civilization, you adopt its custom. And the Rebbe very much felt that in America we should be Chassidim the way Americans are Americans, and the strengths and weaknesses of our culture. But the tzama was still there. The tzama, the longing, the thirst. The Rebbe would say tzama l'chanafshi. And the Rebbe is saying, how many times did the Rebbe say tzama l'chanafshi? How many times did I hear it? Maybe 100 times, maybe more. The Rebbe sang tzama l'chanafshi. When the Rebbe wanted to say something with a melody that was personal to him, he would say tzama. 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 In other words, on a simple level, it hurts. It's tutvei. Anyway, you have to say l'chaim and be mafsik. And anyway, l'chaim and l'bracha. Like I said, I think we should sing the Niggunim that the Rebbe taught. Anim v'kadud, anim l'chaim and l'bracha. You got it. Anim v'shi l'chaim, everybody. L'chaim and l'bracha. L'chaim and l'chaim.